So, welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to talk about the fetters again. And it's fetters 4 and 5. Hi, Maria.
Hello, Sabina.
So, let's jump right in. And how about you explaining a little bit about what are fetters 4 and 5 and why do we pair them?
Oh, yeah. Well, fetters 4 and 5 are usually called desire and ill will, and traditionally they are fetters 4 and 5. And even though they are numbered sequentially, they usually fall together, a bit like there are three factors, if you like, to the self illusion, or three fetters sort of tied together with along with the self illusion. And desire and ill will is not so much describing the symptoms of reactivity, which is like the pushing and pulling at the world, but it's more highlighting that we've got this mechanism at all, of but I want, but I don't want. So that manifests as either longing, so I guess, the desire aspect, or the ill will is the pushing away, the aversion side of it. But it is really like two sides of the same coin. And it boils down to a kind of but I want, but I don't want response, in response to things not going our way, in life, whether that's very specific. It's usually quite specific when it's reactivity. Um, so, yeah, I just maybe ought to say, well, the illusion is about whether the reason why you react at all, whether that be to push away or pull towards. But it's not necessarily responses. Sometimes people say, well, how would I live without my reactions, um, and of course, there are very necessary and normal responses and reactions in life. But this is not about necessary responses, like when you're ill and, for example, you go to the doctor and you take some medicine. If that's what you believe in doing, you know, or survival responses or reactions, which are like getting out of the way of a moving car. Is a kind of hardwired, you'd hope you'd have those reactions still in place, right? But this is about the type of reactivity that causes us suffering, because it's about things not going as we prefer, which is a fair bit of the time that happens, I think, in life. It's not that life always does go as we want, and if we don't accept that and we continually rise up to do something to counter it, whether that's mentally or physically, that's a hell of a lot of energy going into fighting what is actually happening. And it's not even very effective, because you don't necessarily have the wherewithal to respond in a more creative way to the same stimuli, so the same issue or happening. And another point I wanted to make, which can be confusing sometimes for people, is, well, what's wrong with reactivity? I know there's nobody here reacting and nobody there to be reacted to, so what's the problem? And while this isn't at all actually about morality or whether or not reactions are good or bad, but it's nevertheless, if those reactions are happening, they do have a big impact on life or the lives that's close to you. And this is a way to get to the illusion that creates those reactions in the first place. And yes, I always see desire and will as a form of slavery, actually. It's a bit of a strong word, but it's as if we're a slave to our impulses in that way, when under the spell of this illusion. And we can't actually make very good choices often. And there's an awful lot of unnecessary suffering involved because, well, you know, we've talked before about first arrow, second arrow idea in Buddhism that, you know, life does provide pain sometimes. You know, it's like something will happen that we don't want, but we add to that by creating a lot of mental emotional rumination, a lot of anguish sometimes, um, or yeah, just any kind of emotional reaction. Getting hot under the collar even doesn't necessarily make you any better at trying to do what you're trying to do. um, so even on a sort of smaller level, it's unhelpful to us, but on a bigger level, it can just be a cause of continual or repetitive suffering.
Mhm.
And so, yes, to be free of that is the idea of inquiring into desire and ill will.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, very much. And thank you so much for you made some very, very important points here. Like this is not about right or wrong, you know, should I react or not, or should I turn into the wallpaper and never be able to react in any way?
Right.
And also like that it is quite different here than the first three fetters because now we're looking at the mechanism itself. So
Yeah.
also the way of inquiring into them is quite different. So
Mm.
you're very experienced guide through the fetters. How do you inquire into the fetters? What is your best practice approach for people to?
Okay. Yeah. Well, the best practice approach is to choose an issue that reliably irks you in your life. Ideally, not one that's too strong, whereby you react maybe instantly, or too weak, whereby you know you might quickly lose interest, or actually just quite quickly resolve your reactivity in relation to that issue. It doesn't actually matter it's interesting. It doesn't really matter what issue you choose in order to use this methodology, as long as it's some way that you can reliably provoke a reaction in a way, in order to look at it. And it sounds funny, you know, why would you provoke yourself to react? It sounds almost sadistic, masochistic or something. But it's like you're doing it every day in your everyday life anyway. But what this is doing is bringing it into the laboratory, if you like, and um, you're slowing the whole process down so that you can have a really good look at what this seeming inevitability is about reactivity. So I ask people to choose an issue um, which irks them, and then get to what it is that they would really want instead. So the idea is, you know, if you could wave a magic wand, you know, what would be the one thing that this person could do, or if it's a person, you know, what is the one thing this person could do or say that would make all the difference in this situation? Um, so, for example, say you do a task for someone and they're kind of a bit dismissive about it or sarcastic even, um and you know this obviously isn't doesn't feel good, and you react. um you look at what you would want instead from that. What would make the difference? You know, what about if Sue said to me, if Sue just thanked me for doing the things that I said I did for her, for example. So you get to what the want is behind it's usually we're working off most often we're working with an adverse reaction, not always, but often we start there. But so it's very important to look at what you actually want, because normally we're only focused on what we don't want in that situation, or what we don't like. We might even know what we don't like about the behavior of the other person and just say a blanket, I don't like that person, you know. Um, so identify what the issue is, then identify what the want is behind the issue, then I help create a sentence with a person that's phrased in the negative, so they don't say thank you for uh, the things I do at work, for example. um It could be a really simple thing. And sometimes when people phrase it in that simple way, they think, well, this is too simple. Of course, they wouldn't say thank you. It kind of works against logic sometimes, or seems like, really, is that all I really want from that from that person? But often it is. So there can be some sobering realizations there sometimes, that behind a reaction is a very simple wish. Um, and it's not happening. It's not happening. So we're going to go with that fact. I get the person to intone that sentence to themselves. Let's say Sue doesn't say thank you when I don't know, clean the photocopier out at work. It could be a really simple thing. And then watch for whatever initial sensations arise. It's usually somewhere in the center of the body, throat can tighten, sternum, uh, abdomen, somewhere in that sort of central bit, you feel an icky or unpleasant response. And usually we don't even catch that. We've just gone straight into the mental machinations, or yeah, whatever that bunch of thoughts and emotions is about that situation, that person. So even to catch what the basic feeling is like a novel thing sometimes for people. Oh, I just feel a bit there, for example. Um, and then you get them to separate that out, or watch for what is the typical reaction that's kind of waiting to set off. Um, and it's usually, I don't know, a bunch of thoughts. It's often mental. You're thinking about the issue. Yeah. Um, so you've already skipped, that's the fact. And you've gone on to about, so what you try and do is hold both, hold the initials, the fact. Well, let's see, three things at once. The fact sounds complicated, but it's not really. It's like you introduce the fact to yourself. And how does this basically make me feel on a sensation level? Then how do I want to react to that? You can feel it like starting up, trying to start up sometimes. And then you try and find a gap between the two. Um, Sometimes it's literally a momentary gap between, you might catch it, before, but the initial sensations going into the reaction. And sometimes it's almost like you have to create that gap, that space, because you don't have any. So what I use various suggestions for how people can acclimatize to this gap or create a gap. And it's basically a way of slowing the whole process down, so you can really look in that tiny space between the two things, the reaction, the sensations and the reaction. And what the real focus of the inquiry is what creates the reaction? What is the trigger from A to B, from sensations to reaction? Um, and the illusion is actually that there is some kind of, that you have some kind of necessary, almost like a regulating mechanism, which has to fire off. I mean, it can manifest differently for different people. So for some people, it's almost like literally a trigger, a button gets pressed, bang. Um, there's even that saying, isn't there? He presses my buttons. So you really look for that button. You really look for that trigger, or it might seem a slower startup, like a sort of app starting up on a computer. Um, Whatever it is to you, it won't show up on an X-ray. It won't kind of, um, it's not going to be a real findable thing that you find in yourself, but you look for it as if it were a real findable thing. And I can't stress that enough with all the illusions. Um, you might know the punchline that this trigger isn't there, the mechanism isn't there, but somewhere you do believe it's there, or it wouldn't still be operating so marvelously, you know? Um, yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
And yeah, people do eventually see that, oh, there's really nothing there. There's nothing bridging that gap. And at some point, the illusion should, well, with the case of desire and ill will, there's two shifts. So we'll talk about that. But um, yeah, basically, you experientially, viscerally see and feel the absence of any linking mechanism. And in that moment, there is a point of freedom and you can break with that whole illusion. But like I said, with design ill will, it's often more than one of those pops necessary because it is such an embedded. The thing is, these two illusions, or one illusion, if you want to merge them, is, I'd say, the trickiest of all of them to uproot. It's not say it's not doable. I think once you've seen through self, the first three illusions, you're in a position to see the next thing, because reactions are far more obvious to you, and you already don't identify with them so much, but you're still subject to them, as it were. If that's yeah, it's one way of putting it.
Yeah, lots of good points again. First of all, like you have a much better chance of seeing through 4 and 5 once the illusion of self has fallen, because agency is part of the first 3 fetters, so kind of clears the way nicely. And then also mentioning that the thinking, oh, there is no one to react or whatever, that it's important to actually look for something there, not pretend it's not there, because there's no agent or whatever. There
Yeah,
is something happening, and
yeah, yeah.
so that's another good pointer. And what I find is that the gap for a lot of people in the beginning is a hard thing to find, because
It is.
reactions are like nanosecond speed. You just jump right
Yeah,
over the reactions and then go like,
yeah,
what happened to me? And when then you say like, find the gap between uh, what's happening in the body and the reactions, like there is no
yeah.
gap. So you
Exactly.
one
Yeah,
good thing is like slowing the process down
yeah,
enough so you can sense, oh, well, there is a gap, even if it's tiny at first.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and then also not
It's
using some trigger that is too intense, so it doesn't push you over, right? So you can actually then, if you find the break,
work with it.
stay there long enough to look around.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
No, that's very true. People don't always find the gap easy. That can be, in fact, it's really worth spending time. People always want to get to the main meat of the thing, let's look for this trigger. But actually, you can't do it so effectively unless you're quite pliable, easy, if you like, with um, finding some spaciousness, really. And it's not that the reactions aren't happening at all. It's almost like you've got somebody, maybe Kevin used this analogy of two little flames on the stove at the same time. It's like you've got two pots on a slow simmer, and you've got the sensations there. You've got the imminent reactions here, and you've got it all within one space, as it were, and within that you should find it's a little gap between the flames, as it were. Yeah, it's one image. Some people use a landscape image as well, which can be helpful if they're very visual, which is like the sensations being in the foreground, and if you imagine a picture, the reactions being in the background. And the gap can be some like little body of water between the two. And you can look at why you have to travel from, like, go over that bridge.
Mhm.
What's connecting this side of the stream to the other. Yeah,
Mhm.
you can use various tricks to help people to find some kind of spaciousness, but it's a very important part of being able to look into it.
Mhm. Yeah, and you already mentioned that with 4 and 5, it's more like doing several rounds before they
Yes.
actually break. So,
Yeah.
and once they break, what is the shift like when these feathers drop?
Yeah, maybe I should explain what it's like first when there's a significant break with the with this illusion, because it's you do notice it. I mean, you can have little mini inroads with it, and actually, sometimes I think we used to think there was just like one practice run, as it were, break where you weaken. We used to call it weakening, and then you break. But since discovered that there can be a series of weakenings, actually, this one seems to need a series. So you're seeing the same thing, that there is no connecting mechanism between your slightly uncomfortable or unpleasant sensations and that reaction that you always do. Um, it's always the same focus. It could be a different issue that you look at, of course. Um, but when you weaken it, you notice that you're not taking you still react, but you're not taking your reaction so seriously. Um, they're not coming up as often. They're not coming up. When they do come up, they don't stay. They don't stay for hours or a long time. They just come, oh, and then they go. And yeah, what's the other thing? Frequency, duration. I can't remember the other one actually, but you do notice basically that you're not reacting so much, and it's not happening as often. And yeah, and oh, the other one is just simply that they are weaker reactions. Often you can still get a biggie if it's a big issue for you. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but generally speaking, you might notice this general reduction in reactivity, and you might even find it quite strange at first. Like, why am I not reacting? Because if you've been doing this like all your life, in relation to this to similar uh, things happening, and suddenly you find, oh yeah, that thing's happening, and I'm not reacting, and it feels like something's missing. So people can even react at first to the fact they're not reacting, which is a funny one. Um, like there's something wrong. I'm not reacting. Where's my reaction? No, but it can feel destabilizing a little bit. Like, well, I've always done this, and this is my control. This is my and I've lost it. It's like I'm letting things happen. Now, this is not the same as passivity, or sort of, reactions are not non-reactivity is not about letting people walk all over you or doing crossing boundaries. So in fact, you might get more effective you should get more effective at responding to those situations, interestingly, because you lose your fear of along with reactivity, you lose your fear of people not being pleased by what you say or do, which is a big
Yes.
one
Hmm.
to mention as well. And well, we'll come to that. The effects of
Yeah.
stopping this stuff. But yeah, there's a weakening first, and then it's great. You really do notice a difference, and you do notice usually a reduction in suffering along with that. But that you have to acclimatize to it, because firstly, it feels unfamiliar and a bit strange. And you've broken a very deep condition. You're starting to really break a very deep conditioning, so it can set off some stuff too. And if people have trauma in their past, it can set off some of that stuff. And might need some looking at it on the side, as it were, from a healing point of view, resolving point of view. Yeah, sometimes feelings come up you just didn't know you had, and might just want to be felt a lot more. Um, but then you do to actually break the better. You just it's the same investigation, and by now at least really well what to do. You're used to. You should be used to almost any kind of reaction coming up and knowing how to look into it. And you might find you can do it on the hoof more as well. You don't have to just bring it into the lab and think of an issue and come up with a sentence or an image and then do it slowly. You might even be able to do it in situ. Something's happening. You just take a second. Oh, I don't feel good because this is happening. And even sometimes that very acknowledgement can be enough to just finish the process, as it were. Do I need to react? This is how I want to react. Do I have to? And it breaks with it. But this is not a management technique about reactivity. fundamentally. It is about, ideally, you do have a bit more time and space to really look for, where's that thing that
Mhm.
means I have to react?
Mhm.
Oh, it isn't there.
Mhm.
It really isn't there.
Mhm.
Wow. You know, and
Wow.
sometimes, yeah, no, sometimes it's good to actually say something to yourself like it really isn't there, because to get it right through the, we've got that expression, don't we? Get it through your skull, but it's not through your skull. It's like it's through this um stubborn illusion, if you like, that there should be something there. There must be something there. There is something there. You keep saying there isn't, but to
Mhm.
actually say, wow, there's really nothing there. There's really nothing there. When you see it, obviously, can help that penny to drop.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, thank you for also giving some pointers where people can look at and identify that the weakening of the fetters 4 and 5 is like reactions change, the duration, the intensity, and such. So you can see like, oh, why I'm in the process of weakening the fetters, and then uh,
Yeah.
also hear a lot from people like, yeah, I've already seen that there is no mechanism and the penny hasn't dropped yet. And that's the second advice, just stick with it,
Yeah.
again and again
Yeah.
and again. Hmm. Yeah.
In fact, yeah, there can be a holding pattern with, seeing it, and yet it doesn't seem to bite all the way through.
Hmm.
Um, and you might give up at that point, but I think, yeah, it is helpful to have the perspective, to have a bit of faith, a bit of persistence is really helpful, because it is cracking it, it is chipping away, and it will actually one day just crack. And yeah,
Yeah, and like you said, it can be quite astonishing to see, wow, there's no reaction here. Stuff you've been
yeah,
reacting to strongly all your life, and it comes up
yep,
again, the situation, and there's nothing, no reaction at all. And it can be quite startling, like, whoa, what's this? And then, of
yeah.
course, the freedom, because, yeah, we've talked about that,
Well, yeah.
the
I
suffering.
used to get,
Mm-hmm.
I do remember I used to get a double response of, wow, the freedom, yeah, the freedom.
Mm-hmm.
But also, whoa, this is odd. you know,
Yeah.
I remember
Okay.
that is, yeah.
Mm.
And then it
Yeah.
becomes, well, new normal, you do that new perspective, new way of operating becomes uh, more normal eventually.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it can be
So,
quite suspicious for the people around you that they see you not reacting
yeah.
anymore, where they know you've always reacted to, or one should react to. And
Yeah.
but it brings with it a great freedom. So, yeah.
Yeah, it does indeed. Yeah, no, it's true actually that other people can notice. They often do actually,
Mhm.
because reactivity is so often manifests in actual actions and speech, does it not? It's not just doesn't just stay in people's thoughts, and it tends to. Yeah, people do notice that you're not rising to the bait, perhaps, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that you're just simply easier to be around, or something really simple. Um,
Hmm. Yeah. And so, since this is such a central point of the deep suffering, and when that is gone, how does this shift, how does this breaking of the fetters change or reflect in everyday life? What are the changes that you may notice when the fetters
oh,
go?
it's a very good question. Yes.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, what are the changes? Well, we've just in a way mentioned them, that the things that would normally uh and yourself, as it were, well enough to almost anticipate those things that always caused you grief of some kind or another. And suddenly it's not that you are not registering it as something unwanted. it's still, you're still going to get pain or unwanted facts happening, unwanted happenings. People that might still not, very very likely to still not do what you want or prefer, and preferences don't go away. It's not like you would suddenly prefer mushrooms over, when you always hated them, or um tea over coffee or whatever. But um yeah, it you're not having to react. You are finding suddenly there's this space appears often. I think people notice more spaciousness because they can register that it's not what they want, it's not what they prefer, and actually, um, well, either decide, well, this is something I need to accept because it's happening, or I'm going to do something about it. Um, it's a more practical. It opens up the possibility for all the other kind of responses that you could have. Um, so it's not to say that if something that you always react. I mean, you might actually, weirdly enough, I found sometimes that I've, for the first time in my life, found better solutions for things that I'd always reacted to, because there had been no space to look at that before. It's hard to give you a concrete example, really, but I do remember noticing it with lots of very obvious practical things, or even how people would, interact, or I would interact with them. I would notice there was more, well, just more possibilities because there wasn't a reaction there. So it's like, well, what do we do? It's usually the same sort of situations in your life. You haven't necessarily changed your whole life just because you've changed your reactivity, right? So you might have the same partner, the same job, the same kid, the same place you live. I mean, you might change where all those things, but probably not. So you will notice in that very everyday way that you are no longer reacting. I noticed I had loads more energy available because those reactions had taken up so much energy without me even knowing it. You know, the energy was going into conflicted feeling, or um, having to think of, having to go those thought routes rather than actually just think, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah,
Um, so there was that.
that's a good point. Like it changes the bandwidth,
Yeah,
both of the possibilities of change, that you just couldn't see because you just
yeah,
so
yeah,
chained into this one reaction, and then also the freeing up of all this energy that goes into resistance and these thought loops and all of that. So, and the nervous system that has to react and all that.
yeah,
So,
right. Yeah,
mhm,
that's
that
tiring too, isn't it? The nervous system constantly being activated, a bit like in a, say, trauma situation. Where, yeah, it's like you're on hypervigilance or something. um so yeah, you do notice I mean, the mind gets quieter, everything gets a little quieter because of that, not in a sort of boring way. Although, having said that, what you might notice is that you don't have the extremities of the reaction, the responses or feeling that you used to have, that you, by the desire and ill will, you added in a certain level of excitement, or, oh, I really love pizza. Do I? Yeah, I enjoy the pizza. It's okay. But that kind of hyping of pleasurable um activities, or of any kind, uh, by the addition of the mental attribution of, this is fantastic, or the mental attribution really of, oh, this is terrible. Uh, so what you find is that and that can take some acclimatizing to as well. You're not on that big roller coaster anymore where you can touch heights and depths um, of extremes. And so you find it's like you get a bigger middle ground or something.
yes, perfect.
um I don't know how to describe it really, but you do find that you're not pulled into either. Yeah, bliss or um, terrible, you know, or certainly not any terrible reaction.
Mhm.
This is awful. Um, so it can feel as if you've lost the spark a little bit at first as well. I remember feeling like I wasn't pulled into drama anymore. Dramas. It's like you're no longer pulled into any mental dramas. And I found literally, I used to enjoy watching dramas on TV, following emotional kind of dramas, and I, couldn't- I wasn't interested. I just thought, what's the point? And so I kind of did lose some of my interests because, or it felt like that, a temporary kind of uh, detachment, even
Mhm.
that felt unfamiliar and even a bit alarming at first. And again, this is like when you go through shifts, you feel things, these changes more acutely, but they really, really quickly become such a new normal that you then, within a few weeks, let's say, or a month, you're no longer noticing any loss, or there isn't a loss actually. It's a gain because you're no longer yeah, you're no longer caught in but I want, but I don't want, and relating to the world from that basis.
Yeah. Yeah, it can, I agree. It can feel at first very unfamiliar because the way you expand the bandwidth in one direction, you kind of like narrow it in another way. So these big ups and downs just equal out, and
Mm,
um, and it may feel odd at first, you know. And it, to me, it showed how much the mind loves drama, you
oh
know,
yeah,
and kind of like has to push things up or push things down and turn up the volume, and all of that is not necessary. It doesn't take away the joy for life or
no,
anything, or it's just
no.
unfamiliar. Yeah.
That's right. It's not that pleasures go away either. You can really enjoy, something pleasurable. Um, and in fact, you might enjoy it more because you're not actually creating a mental facsimile, facsimile on top of it of, oh, this is great, which is a load of noise, actually, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Hmm.
that's interesting, isn't it? Because I found for example, I thought, yeah, I don't think this particular food is like I'm having a fantastic time, but I'm actually really enjoying my food.
Hmm.
Or, oh, it's not so tasty. And that's so what, in a way, try again, cook
Yeah.
better, whatever. But, I think that I've sometimes mentioned this, but I think it's almost like not clinically, but it's almost as if with desire and ill will, you have a slightly manic depressive um, outlook and approach to life because you're always either kind of above experience or below experience mentally and emotionally rather than there, you know? And so I think losing this illusion allows you to be there and
Mm.
not you. You're actually seeing that there's something that isn't there, but it allows for um, more aliveness in a funny sort of way
Hmm.
because you don't have to do all this yeah, up, down, round the houses, dramas.
Yeah. And these extra additions that fall away is often those kickstarters for the storytelling, the endless storytelling. And when that falls away, like you said before, the mind just naturally gets much more quieter. So, which
It
clears
does,
the
yeah.
way for the more subtler fetters to inquire, but we will look into that some other time. But is there
Yeah,
something
sure.
that you think we missed in this exploration of fetters 4 and 5? Something you want to add, or?
Um, Not really. I mean, well, except maybe that I might have said it at the beginning, actually. I correct me if I have. But I think while reactions are really obvious to people because they do notice them and they suffer them, um, mostly they are aware, they, as you get older anyway, you become aware, oh yeah, I always react to this or that. But the illusion is not, you know, about the reaction itself. It is really about why you have to react at all. Yeah. And that's the that's out of sight. Any illusion is because it's out of sight to you. So, it does require looking where you might not normally look, not looking at the reaction itself. Like if you go to a psychologist, you can look at your various reactions and understand them from where they came from and whatever. But this is looking at the fundamental mechanism of reactivity itself.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks again for stressing that, and that it's also not about being a better version of yourself that is able to handle stuff better and not to react
Mm,
or to react in more nicer way and all of that. It's none of that. So,
no.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that emphasis, Sabina. It's really important. Yeah.
Mm. Okay,
Um,
great. I think we covered some ground here.
I think it went well. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for your questions, which were spot on, and comments. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for giving the viewers a great inquiry into these feathers, and we will talk some more some other time. Okay,
Bye bye for now.
bye-bye.